and on the way back we had torrential rain. What kind of synth pad did you use / build for that awesome chord progression in the middle? Are you going to do a track breakdown of your remix? When you write albums and EPs, how concerned should you be about the sound / composition of one track to the next? Hey guys, welcome to the Kane audio vlog. It's Friday. It's a long overdue Ask Me Anything. Usual rules apply. Ask me anything you want below this video and I'll get back to you in next week's video. Before I go on to last week's video, let me first cover house admin, starting with the fact that there is no last week's video, and I apologise profusely for not having last week's video. Those of you who watched the week before will know that I was in Amsterdam last week for ADE. I had gone over there with the intention of possibly filming a couple of podcast episodes and at least scoping it out ready for next year. And I had planned on doing my AMA from either the hotel or the airport or wherever I was going to be, because I was going to be travelling back on the Friday. First of all, I didn't get any podcasts done because unfortunately my first night there I was put in the world's worst hotel room. It was that bad. I don't really complain about stuff normally, but this room was so bad. It had a broken AC and it kept making crazy noises and there's all sorts going on. I actually had to move rooms at 3 o'clock in the morning, so that was not a podcast filming friendly room. And then I didn't get my other room until late on Thursday because I was in an interim room in between, so there just wasn't any time or location to film until it was Friday, and I met up with one of the people who was supposed to be the guest for the podcast, and I'd explained to him that it wasn't going to be filmed, blah blah blah. And we met up anyway for a coffee, and turned out where we met up was the perfect place to film a podcast. So but I didn't have my cameras with me, so there we go. That was that. Very annoying. What else has been going on? Oh yeah, so then it got to Friday with the AMA, and I thought to myself, oh, I'll do a live one from my phone, because I was walking back from meeting this person. I'm avoiding naming any of my podcast guests, by the way, because I want them to just be announced at the time. So I was then walking back from near Central to my hotel, and my hotel was right next to Vondel Park, so I was walking through the edge of the park to get there, and I'd sort of thought on the way over, oh, I'll film my AMA here on the way back because it's nice and quiet and blah blah blah. And on the way back we had torrential rain. I mean, rain like you've never seen before. It was like tropical rainforest rain, for the exact amount of time I was walking back, because by the time I got back to the hotel it was fine again. So there we go. So house admin, I have no idea. What have I been doing this week? I've just been meeting deadlines and catching up since AD, to be honest. However, if anyone, and I know a few people I met in Amsterdam, watched these AMAs, so big shout out to you and thanks for meeting up with me. Really did enjoy AD, and definitely back again next year. Yeah, I think there's pretty much only one question this week, so I'm gonna take my time. But other house admin is upcoming stuff. I'm going to be doing a video on recreating one of my my treasured Moog sounds that I use on my Moog, and I'm going to try and recreate that in the grid in Bitwig, just as a sort of a personal challenge. And I figured actually I might film that with you guys, and then you guys have whatever sound we end up with as well. I'm also now going to be starting to do Hackintosh stuff. If you are a member of my Patreon, then you will be able to follow the Hackintosh build over there. If you're not, then head to, is it patreon.com/DomKane? Yeah, let's start at the start. Last week's, or the week before, was number 74, so this is 75. Francesco Di Carlo. Wow, thanks. Great tip about the piano. Thanks as always. So this was the tip about using a transient from a kick drum in a piano. Your remix of Caritas is addictive. Triple high five. Thank you very much. Questions about what kind of synth pad did you use / build for that awesome chord progression in the middle from 235, and what about the reverb settings in the song? The synth pad, there is no synth pad. That's the original song, so that's an orchestra, an actual real orchestra. But I did some gentle compression, and I used some filters, and I scooped out some of the very low end, and I also applied an LFO to the filter cutoff, so it gives a slight wobble. The reason for this is partly because the original song I was given to remix, I think, is 45 BPM, and I need to make that fit into a 124, 126 BPM, whatever it is I did. So one of the ways around that is because if you think about the fact that the original song had no kick drum or any kind of, other than the notation itself, there was no real signifier for tempo, so you can kind of just about make it. It's like when you do music for TV and film, our eyes and ears kind of just fill in the gaps, so actually you kind of don't have to be in sync all the time. And one of the ways I worked around that was by using an LFO on the filter and just making it flutter in my tempo, to kind of fool the listener into thinking that the track is in the correct tempo when it wasn't. Although I did stretch elements of it and ramp it and play around with it. It was a nightmare to stretch, to be honest, but there we go. And I had to rekey it, I think, as well. So there we go. Yeah, so you might be hearing some sort of transient artifacts from the stretching and the rekeying and stuff like that. So it might sound like a synth, I suppose. But yeah, there we go. It was the original orchestra, just lots of effects. As for reverb settings, I used the default Bitwig reverb, but the settings I couldn't tell you because the settings change all the way through. So, and I quite often automate my dry wet and reverb times, because if you listen to some of my hi-hats, for example, in a lot of my tracks, I'll ramp up the reverb time towards the end of an 8-bar loop or whatever, because it just kind of builds room and dynamics and then sucks back in again at the new rotation. So yeah, so I couldn't tell you the settings because they're different all the way through. Zombo. Hi Dom, the remix was godly. You did a nice job on this one. Question, are you going to do a track breakdown of your remix? I would love to see it. Thank you. Have a nice weekend. You too. I don't know. I might do a bit of a breakdown. So I'm not going to do, I don't think I'm going to do a Sonic Academy full course of recreating it. Because I feel like I've done one of those too recently and I'd be going over the same stuff and you guys wouldn't get your money's worth. I know that Mousetrap like people doing the making of type things, so I might do one just for them for their YouTube, and so it'll be just a sort of basic, this is what I did sort of thing. So yeah, I might do that. Cavalcade, cheers Dom, Starbucks, high five. Caritas Remix is a bit special, can't wait for your album, thank you. Yeah, I've been giving that a few more listens recently. It's getting there, it is definitely getting there, which is weird because you spend, I mean, it's taken me what? Well, I had the idea of the story 3-4 years ago, something like that. And you spend so long thinking, oh, it's never going to be finished, it's never going to be finished, and then all of a sudden you think, oh, it's nearly there. So yeah, I can't wait for my album either. Ricky John, hi Dom, feels like a long time since I commented on a video. Busy as you like, but I've still been lurking, planning on getting your latest remix, the rest of the album this week, plus fingers crossed. No, plus the rest of the album, fingers crossed. Finally, have a question. When you write albums and EPs, how concerned should you be about the sound/composition of one track to the next? So, okay, I think I might answer that question a bit differently to other people. So I think a lot of it comes down to how do you define an album. For most people, it's a collection of, say, 12 songs that kind of work in order, that you can kind of sit down and listen to, and that's that. But for electronic music, it's always been kind of 12 of your best tracks, your show reel, your big hitters, and I don't know if I think that's the right way of doing an album. So I think most artists in the electronic industry would say, oh, it doesn't really matter too much, so long as there's not too much of a bad reaction from one to the next, then it's still kind of, it works as an album. For me personally, I think it's hugely important, because this album that I'm doing now, it tells a story, and I will publish that story with the album. It's a sci-fi story, shocker. But it tells a story, and I want each sound to represent something within what I have in my head as the movie. It's somewhat cinematic, and so I need that story to flow, and I need each track to be almost an evolution of the previous while not being that, if that makes sense. I want the sound and composition to be similar and familiar throughout, because it's part of the same film. But again, with a film, you don't want every scene to be identical, so the colouring and the grading and the acting and the quality of everything needs to be the same in each scene of a film, but it needs to progress and tell a story. And I think that's how an album should be for me too, especially in this day and age. And I know I've talked about things like Spotify recently, and I think we're now in a world where streaming is quite important, and personally I feel like we need to be getting our attention spans back together as well. So for me, I feel like for the last 15 years, an album has kind of been a quick get everybody's attention with these bangers and chuck them out there and then it's gone. Whereas now I kind of feel like, no, actually we need you to sit down and have a listen to this from start to finish and let it take you on a journey. I think that's how I see an album. So that's my view. For example, I have one very sparse/spacious track, potentially leading to one that sounds pretty full and aggressive the majority of the way through. Thematically, they seem to stand well next to each other, but I'm wondering if I should close the gap with how full or not they both sound to make them more cohesive together. Yeah, so I think that's getting into the nitty-gritty of it. In terms of fullness. It's a difficult one to describe. So there were tracks that were in my album that I've had to rewrite the intro and outro, or I've re-synthesized some of them. There've been a few where I've listened to the album. Let's say there's one that's fairly gentle and then the next one's fairly aggressive, and I need those two things to tell a story. I need them, but I also need them to flow together, and this is where the album has got difficult. So for me, I've maybe changed up some of the kick drums in the more aggressive one and brought it down a level, and then maybe played with some of the synths and reworked it so it kind of flows a bit better from the previous one, which I think is probably an important thing I need to point out with this album as well. I don't think there are any bangers in the album. There are no anthems in the album. There are no big super hit singles or anything like that. I've tried to avoid that because I feel like, you know, if you think of something like my last EP, Stoic, you know, Stoic, the single, the Stoic, the track, was a big banger, with a big heavy bass line and hard hitting kick drums and a huge melody and whatever. That to me is fine because it's a single or EP, and you want it to hit hard and do its thing. With an album, I want an album to last longer. I want it to be on the shelf a lot longer and to be in people's home. So for that reason, I want it to be something that people are more likely to come back to and just chill out and sit and listen to. So I think an album is just a whole different perspective on what music can be and what the listening experience is about, I guess. And Starbucks, high five. That, my friends, is it for this week. It's only been, well, not long at all. So, thank you very much for listening. Welcome back to those of you who are regular viewers and missed out last week. I do apologise for that. I'm back into the weekly thing now. And that's it. So please do ask as many questions as you can, because this has been a short video and I like the long videos. Get involved, ask me anything you want, whether it be about Amsterdam, my personal life, my views on anything in the music industry, sound design, production, tips, tricks, you name it. Ask anything you want, hence ask me anything. I'll see you next week. Cheers.